Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So today I have a really nice bass on the bench, and there are a couple different reasons why it's actually a pleasure to work on this one. Number one, this is one of my first paying customers who's paying me just for a setup. I'm mostly used to doing like small repairs, setting up my own guitars and setting up some guitars for resale. And I've always gotten compliments on my setups, but I haven't actually done it professionally, I would say. But I have to say, if you're going to start on something, this is actually a really fine instrument to start on. This is a 2013 American Professional jazz bass. The American Professional has some pretty nice features. It has a couple of upgraded features over some of the standard guitars, mainly being in the hardware, and I'm sure there's some upgrades in the pickups as well. But this vintage bridge is actually called a high mass vintage bridge, and it has a large block on the back of it to create more mass, leading to better sustain, and also you're able to string through the back of the bridge or through the body itself, either one. Then on the other end of the bass, on the headstock, those tuners actually have a lot more mass to them as well, and they've got some protections on the back so the gears aren't quite as open. But just generally, this is a really nice bass. It's got a nice set of Alnico pickups, nice solid alder body, 3-color sunburst, tortoiseshell pickguard, which is actually a 4-layer pickguard, a bone nut, a really thin neck, kind of a thin C profile, 9.5-inch radius, rosewood board, maple neck, no skunk stripe, which I find interesting. And this one's been upgraded with some extra strap locks. The reason this one came to me is that this guy just bought this bass. He got a smoking deal on it, by the way. And I haven't really found a reason why it would be sold so cheap, but it is set up quite poorly. It has ridiculously high action right now at 10/64 at the 17th fret. The neck relief is 35 thousandths of an inch, so it definitely needs some truss rod adjustment. And the pickup heights are all over the map. One of them is as high as 13/64. So that is insane. We are going to fix all of that stuff. We're going to use something similar to the process that I used in my Fender knowledge base test with the player jazz bass. Believe it or not, that's probably my most popular video by view count. Now on this one, rather than just a setup, we're going to change the strings and oil the fretboard as well. I've already been doing a little bit of cleanup work, kind of just getting prepared for this, and of course I took all the measurements. The one thing I didn't do was check the truss rod function, and that is something that I definitely do before I take off the strings. Oh, and one more thing. I did plug it in, and all the electronics work fine. The only thing that this thing needs is a little bit of deoxit in the tone pot. It's a little bit scratchy. Actually, let's go ahead and start there, because I think I might actually forget that if I don't do it first. So let's remove that control panel and put some deoxit in that pot. Well, inside here, in case you're curious, all the pots are 250K, and the jack is a Switchcraft jack. Looks like all the pots are CTS. They also all date to 2013, so I'm pretty sure nothing has ever been changed in here. The pickups have vintage cloth wire, everything else is vinyl coated. Alright, that should take care of the pots. All I'm doing is putting a little bit of deoxit in each pot and working it through its full range, and that should take care of any of the scratchiness. Alright, well presto, the control plate is back on. By the way, while I was in there, the other thing that I noted was that the control cavity, and I'm assuming all the cavities in this guitar, are fully shielded. Alright, before we dive into what I would consider to be a standard setup, I want to check the function of the truss rod. Now, normally I would just grab my 3/16 Allen wrench to adjust the truss rod, but this guitar actually has a truss rod hole down here at the heel of the neck, and it is accessible through the pickguard, but you'd probably be best off using a wrench that has a ball end on it, like a hex ball. And luckily, this was included with this guitar. It's the Fender 3/16 adjustment wrench, which has a ball end on it. Just so you're aware of it, some people don't trust these, and they'll actually take the neck off and do the adjustment and put the neck on. It makes for quite a long process. I think this one's going to work just fine. It doesn't seem to be worn down very much, and I don't see any evidence that that nut is stripped at all. Now, like I said, this thing has way too much relief. And the reason I know that is because I measured it beforehand, and just so you're aware, when you measure a truss rod, you want to put a capo at the first fret the guitar around the neck to the body joint. In this case, it's about the 16th or 17th fret. Then you want to measure the neck relief halfway in between that. So in this case, I'll be measuring at the 8th fret. Now the spec on this is 12 thousandths, and that's because it's a 9.5-inch radius. Now you want to count your turns as you do this. I've already put about a quarter of a turn in. I don't want to go too far in one sitting, but I think this thing will take a little bit of adjustment. As long as you count your turns, you can always go back to your original setting. All right, that feels just about right. I'm going to tip it up on its side so I can get a better view. All right, that's super close, but I'm actually going to back it off just a touch. All right, there we go. I like where we're at. This is not the last time we'll adjust the truss rod, but we are done with it for now. I can go ahead and remove the strings and we can do some more maintenance. Now I'm going to try to save these strings just in case this guy breaks a string and he wants to have a spare, because these actually aren't too bad. But the one thing that he did tell me is that he does not like the fact that it's strung through the back of the bridge right now, and he wants the strings to go through the body, so we're going to change that. Now some people would string this guitar one string at a time, but the reason I'm not doing it that way is because I want to clean and oil the whole fretboard. Alright, with the strings out of the way, I want to clean the fretboard, and the way I've been doing that for the last couple decades: quadruple aught steel wool and lemon oil. There's a lot of controversy over both of those things. If you prefer to use synthetic steel wool or fretboard lube, then you do that. But I've been doing this for a long time with no problems. Since I'm using steel wool, I like to tape up all the magnets so that I don't get any steel fragments in the electronics, and then we'll be ready to go. By the way, I've been using the same bottle of lemon oil for many years, so you don't need to use much. In fact, too much is a bad thing. Now whenever I lemon oil my fretboards, especially with steel wool, I always go in the direction of the grain. Also, if you're using steel wool, just be aware there are now little fragments all over your paint and on your pick guard. If you just wipe that off with a paper towel, sometimes you can scratch things. I typically like to come in with a vacuum at this step and just suck all the little fragments off first, and then I can wipe it down with a towel. Sometimes you get a surprising amount of dirt off what looks like a pretty clean fretboard. That was the case here. I mean, it looked like it was pretty well oiled and pretty clean, but you know, there's always some stuff left behind. When it comes to the strings that I was asked to use, they're these Dragon Skin Plus strings. These are stainless steel. They're really punchy, but they do kind of wear on your frets a little bit. So just be sure you want that extra punch if you're going to subject your frets to that. If you have stainless frets, it's less to worry about. At any rate, these things are made in the USA. I don't know a lot about the company, but the technology looks pretty cool. They have sort of a spiral core center and a wire obviously wrapped around that. All right, and as a reminder to myself, I need to go through the body with these strings because that's different than last time. But I do want to go ahead and check the tightness of each one of the nuts on the front of the tuners. All right, with those tight, we can start with the strings. Now, if you refer to the Fender Knowledge Base article or any of the other luthiers you might find online, a lot of them tell you to leave about 4 inches or basically about 2 tuners worth of string past the tuner. And you cut that off and you can insert it into the vintage style tuner and then start your windings. And you want to end up with about 2 to 3 wraps on the post. All right, well that high string turned out perfect, and I'll do the rest of these off camera. Alright, the strings are in place. I did play around with the string spacing a little bit because these saddles have different notches in them, so you can move the strings around, and I got them all spaced evenly. You would think that's right in the center of each saddle, but it's not quite. Also, you'll notice that the capo is back at the first fret, and that's because I'm going to check the truss rod one more time. I measured out the old strings, and even though the top 2 strings were the same diameter, the bottom 2 strings on the old setup were a little bit thicker than these, so I expect to have to loosen the truss rod just a little bit. Alright, now we're in good shape. Now if you're a jazz bass expert from watching my last jazz bass setup video, you know that the spec for a jazz bass in terms of action is measured at the 17th fret, and it's 6/64 on the bass side and 5/64 on the high side. These babies are sky high, so we're going to lower them down quite a bit. Now if you hear a whirring sound in the background, that's just my Peterson strobe tuner. What I'm looking for as I lower this is I'm obviously looking to hit the spec, but also I'm looking to keep my saddle level. Also, just make sure as you're going through all these steps that the bass is brought up to tune each time, because it really can affect neck relief and it can affect action and really every spec, so tune after every change. Alright, I'll keep going across the rest of these strings off camera, but just know that when I'm tightening the screws, I'm raising the action, and when I'm loosening the screws, I'm lowering the action. Alright, I've now brought everything into spec with my trusty action ruler, and while this thing is really cool for setting string action, I like to measure pickup height a slightly different way, and that's with a set of Allen wrenches. The spec for a jazz bass pickup is 7/64 on the bass side and 5/64 on the high side. The way you measure that is by fretting the bass at the last fret and measuring from the top of the pickup pole to the bottom of the string. Now it just so happens that I have pre-selected the Allen wrenches I need. This one is 7/64 and this one is 5/64. And now when I fret these, I can tell my pickup is too high because I've already hit my Allen wrenches, so I just need to use a screwdriver and lower the pickup down. Same thing goes for the bridge pickup as it does on the neck pickup. I'll just move these over, fret these again. This pickup I need to raise. Alright, now the pickups are in spec, so the last thing we need to check is intonation. And all we're doing is comparing the harmonic at the 12th fret to the fretted note. If the fretted note is sharp of the harmonic, we tighten the screw on the bridge, and if the fretted note is flat of the harmonic, we loosen the screw. By the way, we're tuning each string before we do this, and in between every adjustment. A little bit flat. By the way, I know as I go through this, some of you are thinking, well, why is he intonating the bass with it laying on his back? And the reason is because I'm trying to get it close, and I will check it on its side when I'm done. This one has so far been off by quite a bit, and a lot of that can be due to action changes. Really, action affects intonation quite a bit more than you would think. Also, changes in string gauges can affect intonation. Alright y'all, well all I have left is just really minor adjustments. I'll check the neck relief tomorrow after the bass has had a chance to acclimate to my environment and sort of set. I'll check the action around the same time. And of course, I'm going to double check the intonation with the bass on its side. But all that stuff I can do later. The basic setup of this bass is done. This is a really nice instrument, and by the way, you may wonder how you can tell the difference between an American professional jazz bass and an American professional 2 jazz bass. And honestly, the only way that I know of to tell at a visual glance is to look at the neck plate. The neck plate on the professional 1 is square, and the neck plate on the professional 2 is contoured. And there it is, just in case you're curious. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me on this episode. I really appreciate all the likes and all the comments. Join Hack's Guitar Hobby group on Facebook if you'd like to chat with some other like-minded folks. Check out my Amazon links in the description for the parts and the tools in this episode. And be sure to shop there with my link because it helps me out and it doesn't cost you any extra. Thanks a lot for all the subscriptions, and I'll see you guys next time.